What's going on, all you master manipulators of molten metal, and welcome to episode 167 of the Junkies Podcast. Today, we're playing with fire. Literally. My guests today are Michael Friedman and John Tabachek with Fire Technology Innovations. As welders, we often overlook fire safety when welding and become rather complacent when it comes to fire extinguishers and their proper use, inspection, and the amount of faith we have in that big red can. Fire Technology Innovations has put technology into a 70-year-old piece of equipment to make it safer and more reliable for the users in an effort to keep everyone safe. Before we get into today's episode, a quick word from the supporters who keep this ship afloat. Today's episode of the Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Hourglass Ingenuity. My boy Brad Frazier has been keeping his nose to the grindstone and cranking out new TIG torch holders and hood hooks to keep up with demand. These things are selling out within minutes each time he drops a new batch on the website. Go check out hourglassfab.com and sign up to be one of the first people notified when he releases new inventory, and be sure to give him a follow on Instagram if you haven't already. These custom works of art are ridiculous when it comes to the level of attention to detail he's putting into them. I purchased a hood hook and a torch holder on his last release, and I'm impressed with the quality every time I use this item. And since I started using them in the shop, I haven't broken a single Furic cup, so that's a huge plus. We're also brought to you by Everlast Welders, my go-to machine for all the projects that I have to work on in my home shop. I just did a few more jobs last week that required some low-amp TIG welding, and my 255 EXT knocked it out of the park once again. And I'm getting ready to build some flag stands that I'll be donating to the local Boy Scout troop, and I figured that since I have the time, I'll go ahead and TIG weld them, because why not? You can get your Everlast machine today by going to everlastwelders.com, and make sure to use code word ARCJunkies in the comment section at checkout and get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch when you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal. It's a $100 value. And if you haven't checked out my buddies over at Rockmount Research and Alloys yet, what are you waiting for? They have everything you need for your next maintenance or repair gig. And if you're not familiar with their products, I highly recommend going back and checking out episode 149 with Pat Adams, where we talk about all the crazy cool welding rods and accessories that they have to keep your equipment up and running. What if I told you there was a stick electrode you could use in place of carbon arc cutting, and it didn't have to leave behind nasty carbon deposits, and you didn't even need an air compressor to do it? Gone are the days of gouging out cracks and bad welds with a grinder. All you need is a welding machine and an electro rod, and you're ready to gouge, with less smoke, lower fumes, and more arc force. Check out their full line of welding, cutting, grinding, and drilling products today at rockmountwelding.com. All right, everyone, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
You're listening to the Junkies Podcast. Helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, on the line with me is Michael Friedman and John Tabachek. Did I get it right?
You did. Nice job.
Close enough with Fire Technology Innovations, and I kind of wanted to take a different spin. As you all know, April is National Welding Month, and I wanted to take a different spin. We talk about welding, 12 months out of the year, so I figured this month I would like to focus a little bit more on safety when it comes to welding. So these are the first guys I come in contact with. They actually developed a new way to, or a new type of fire extinguisher. So I guess that design hasn't changed since probably the 60s or 70s?
More like the 50s or 40s.
Wow. So we've had innovations in welding electrodes and welding machines and all this other stuff, but we never really see a lot of innovation when it comes to safety. And as most of the listeners can relate, safety's kind of a pain in the ass. Sometimes it's cumbersome. It gets in the way of us doing our job. That's just the mentality of a welder. But it's something that we need, and we kind of talked a little bit offline before we got into the episode that, having the proper safety, it can save you time and it can save you money. As long as if you have good operating equipment, it's going to save you time and it's going to save you money in the long run. So tell me a little bit about, we'll start with Mike. Tell me a little bit about your history when it comes to fire technology.
So I actually worked for Procter & Gamble for 29 years all around the world. I did a lot of work in our manufacturing plants, and safety was really critical. And we would do safety things all the time. And when you go into a plant, you take your rings off, you take your ties off, you have to wear special shoes. And that was the first thing that they talked about. So that was really important. And I had responsibility in Latin America for all the warehouses. So good manufacturing processes were important. And we really built that into the culture and in the way people did work. So those lessons stayed with me. And then after that, I did a number of other roles. The last 7 years there, I was in leading innovation around the world, launching new products and services. And then P&G's mission made a lot to me. It was about bettering the lives of all the world's consumers a little bit every day. So I kind of woke up inspired by that, saying, what I'm doing is really going to help people in their daily lives. Then I joined a innovation management consulting company, and our mission there was helping our clients deliver the promise of innovation. So that was to grow their business, to help people adopt their products and make their sales and profit targets. So I got a lot of exposure to a whole lot of other companies, global companies around the world. During that time, I met some inventors in California, and they wanted some help launching their products, and they had been spending the last 15 years developing a new fire extinguisher. And so I liked it, but what really impressed me was their mission, and it was about saving lives and protecting properties. Because the whole family was working this together. They were in the service company for fire extinguisher services, La Sierra Fire Company. And one of them's now a great-grandfather. He's 82 years. He saw people in a car accident. They had five fire extinguishers. They didn't work, and people died. And that stuck in his mind. And then one of his sons went to a apartment fire, and they fired off like 20 fire extinguishers, and people died. And then the other son who runs the business, his father-in-law had it, and a fire extinguisher blew up on him, which we find is not an infrequent occurrence, unfortunately, because they're on 195 PSI of pressure, and it took away 3/4 of his stomach. So these guys were committed to really understanding the system issues, why there were so many problems, and could they come up with a better way. So I joined them. I left my consulting firm and started up with them, and then John and I started our company up together. And of course, over that time, we just heard so many stories about the industry and the challenges. And so emissions were important to me. And so our mission for Fire Technology Innovations is empowering people for life and fire safety. And it's our belief that technology and innovation can help make people safe, create environments where they're safe. But in order to do that, we also have to get the behaviors so that they can be safe. So whether that's an organization or whether that's an individual, whether it be on the job site or you're out alone, if you don't behave in the right way, doesn't matter how great the technology is, you can still get hurt. I think, Jason, you've seen that in your own welding experiences. You got to follow the directions, follow the safety practices, otherwise you're vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. There's a reason all the safety rules are written that nobody wants to talk about. And like everything that we have to conform to, whether it's fall protection, fire safety, chemicals, whatever, it's all written in blood. They're not going to make a rule just because they have nothing better to do. Somebody has died or been seriously injured or maimed before these rules come into effect. Before OSHA mandates that, hey, you need to wear a hard hat, somebody cracked their grape on the job site. Or, if you have to have a fire extinguisher on site, that's because a fire has been started. Or you have to wear fall protection. That's because somebody has fell. So all these laws and regulations they're written in blood. Somebody paid the sacrifice for that law to come to fruition.
And so that's why we believe as part of our work, we're not selling a product, we're creating an environment, but then thinking about how can we help individuals really adopt the behaviors they need to be safe. And then how can we educate them on the importance of it and what it's going to mean to them, for their business, for their coworkers, whatever the situation. And then underlying all that, we think data is really important, because we got to understand if what we're doing is working. And then if it's not, why and what can we do to change it? Mm-hmm. So that's where data collection, for welding, all hot works, to understand where do we have issues, what are the issues, and then how do we go about fixing that. We believe that's important. And for fire safety, there's a very complex ecosystem that's involved, from the buyers all the way through to the service companies, to the users, to the manufacturers, to the fire fighting folks. And so this all has to work together. So we believe it's important not to blame people, but to figure out how to fix the system. Because people want to do well. Nobody goes to work wanting to get hurt.
Right.
So we've got to create a system to do that, and data is important to really understand that. So that's what, I'm really pleased to be working with John on this, and we're really excited about it because it's a higher purpose, because lives are important, property is important.
Yeah. And John, what's your story?
Basically, I was in the telecom industry for close to 3 decades, had my own business, moved my business from Michigan to here to Southern California. Got out of the old cold weather there, had enough of that. And in a roundabout way, met Mike, and we became friends for a while, and he, introduced me to the Eliminator. And so I thought about it, dabbled into it, talked to, one thing you want to do is basically the people who are the experts. I was somewhat of a novice in this. I obviously have been in innovation with telecom industry. And then so I did a presentation for FEMA and Orange County Fire Authority. And so you had all the fire marshals, fire chiefs all surrounded there and all in their uniforms, and showing them a new product. The Eliminator is a complete redesign, complete paradigm shift in fire safety. So everybody's used to seeing the big red pressurized metal canister fire extinguisher. So I come walking in with a non-pressurized, only pressurized when you're ready to use it, made of an engineered polymer, so it's not going to scratch, rust, or dent, and doesn't have a gauge, but there's actually a fluffing wheel, so you have an internal auger that you can actually turn and fluff the powder, because the fire marshals and the fire chiefs, they actually have their people go around, maybe a trainee or something, once a week to the fire trucks, bang on the bottom of them with a rubber mallet to kind of loosen up the powder. Because of that pressure, because of that vibration, the powder actually chunks or cakes, and they don't work as designed. So having these fire chiefs and fire marshals basically high-fiving me and giving me the stories of, what they thought of this new design, because fire extinguishers, unfortunately, are a necessary evil, but this is all they have for the past 65 to 70 years. So here we come with new innovation, something that for them is far safer, because their guys are going into fires, with a fire extinguisher and banging it on the ground a couple times to make sure it works. Well, here we come in with this brand new innovation that one of the things that's impressive as well, that the FEMA guys were impressed about, is this is a unit where you can actually do the service. Because right now, by law, you have to have a third-party maintenance company in a commercial environment come in and check your fire extinguishers. And those guys there, unfortunately, aren't there for your safety. They're more to make a profit. So they're going to get in and out of your facility as soon as they can, go back and, go to the next client. Well, here's a product that we've simplified the safety aspect or the service aspect of the fire extinguisher. So we offer an online course where you now become certified for your company, so you can actually do the service that is mandatory. You still have to do service. It's not like you get away from service, but it's your own product, and your own safety is involved. So you're going to take care of that and not have to worry about paying these exorbitant fees to this individual who's coming into your facility once a year, once every 6 months, whatever it may be, that is basically out there for them, obviously, to make a buck. So a whole new technology, again, first time in 65 to 75 years. And so for me, what really the selling point was when I got into this was the fire professionals are the ones that were most impressed by this. And now, obviously, we're selling these across the country, and really changing some people's lives. And obviously, with COVID, keeping people out of facilities, third-party vendors where, hey, we can do that ourselves. Some of these major corporations, when you're talking having tens of thousands of fire extinguishers across the country, that fire extinguisher service bill kind of starts, racking up some serious dollars.
That's a significant charge.
Yeah. And so it's not just, it's safety. We're saving people money. And also it's something where it's, knowing this product's going to work every time. Whereas the other ones, again, you got to manipulate it, bang it on the ground a few times, which that's again, the old way to do it. So, we're bringing people into the 21st century, and actually we're having a blast. The people who now understand it, we have people in the hot works like yourself who basically they swear by this, because for them, it's not just about having, it's a matter of, life and death. It's a matter of protecting their customers, their people they're working with, and their facilities as well. So, like I said, it's something that I think people should just take a look at. And, it's bottom line, it's just a far safer product, and something that's updated and needed updating.
I want to go back and kind of unpack some of the problems with the traditional fire extinguisher, because like I said, we were talking before the show, last week, and I never really thought about it, because when I was running my mobile welding business, I would keep everything locked up in the cab of my truck, just so if somebody stopped by the truck and they liked, something in the bed of my truck more than I did, they wouldn't walk off with it. So fire extinguisher is one of them, because that's an investment, as a small business operator, whether you're working out in the field or in your home shop or something like that, a fire extinguisher, you should have that. But it's an expense. But I always had mine in the back of my truck, and just because it was easily accessible and stuff like that. But I also have tools back there, and I never thought about it. But you're right. I mean, you're rolling around with a small bomb in the back of your truck that's just full of powder. So, what's going to happen when you're tooling down the road 80 miles an hour, unless you're in Texas, they're like 90, 100, 105. If you're driving down, I love driving in Texas. You're driving down the road and, a tool falls on it, or it tips over and hits a tool. Well, you get that 190 PSI and all that powder in there. Poof, you get a smoke screen inside your truck while you're barreling down the highway. On top of that, you kind of put a lot of trust into that item that it's going to work when you need it. Now, I've had the same fire extinguisher for, probably since, I don't know, for the past 6 years at least. I'm interested to see, I want to go in the backyard and discharge this thing and see if it actually fires off. Because it's been riding around in the back of the truck, setting it down on the concrete, setting it down, whatever. Interested to see, if that chemical inside is actually compacted. So, there's a couple things we can unpack there. Is number one, you're kind of walking around with a bomb, especially if you got it in the back of your truck. And then two, like you were saying, the caking problems that you guys have seen. And I watched some of the videos on your Instagram and your website. And I guess 25% of the fire extinguishers that are in service are actually non-functioning.
Well, it's interesting. I'll break it down. We break it down in the product design challenges and then service challenges. So the number that we've done data collection on with Dyne Fire Protection Labs, one of the things that United Laboratories that has their seal on it and is required for any commercial unit, you can't swap out different chemicals or different parts over the life of the fire extinguisher that are different than when you do the test. And the UL tests are unbelievable. And if you look at the size, Jason, you saw some of the fires that these extinguishers put out to get a 3A 40 BC rating. It's just like there are 30-foot flames and stuff. So it's really serious. And not only have to put it out, you've got to keep it out. So the product design is a challenge because it's 195 PSI, as you said, and that creates a lot of pressure. So the TSA actually treats these as bombs, and they're very nervous about it. So when you go to test it, you have to get pressure test that goes up to 1,080 PSI, and then it has to fracture. It has to hold it for 60 seconds, and then you take it to failure around 1,400 PSI. It's got to break the same way because they don't want it flying in shrapnel. Mm-hmm. But the eliminator, as a thermal polymer, had to go through all of that. But one of the design flaws in metal is that it rusts. Another design flaw is it dents. When you dent it, the paint chips and that rusts. Rusting brings moisture in, which cakes the powder. And when it's caked, it's harder for the pressure to get the powder out. And then if you don't get the powder on the fire, you can't put it out.
Mm-hmm.
So that the metal cylinder is a challenge. Of course, the high pressure is a challenge from a product design, because if you're, like you said, you have it in the truck and it falls off the back, the canister is solid, even though you could dent it. But if it falls on the top part, the nozzle and the head, that could get bent, and that's what causes them to explode. And we've got some videos on our website that happens. And, it's really unfortunate because it makes a construction site potentially dangerous.
Right. It's very similar to the oxyacetylene tanks that we use, or, the mixed gas tanks. Anything under a high pressure cylinder, it's got a brass valve on the top. So you got to make sure that it's chained up and secured, every time that you're using it, because if that thing tips over, that's when the potential hazard begins. If that valve gets knocked off, it's turning into, a torpedo going across the shop floor or the job site.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you've got the pressure gauge, which unfortunately is not a high quality gauge on most fire extinguishers. And if you don't load it right, so if you take the pressure over 195, you can break the gauge, but the gauge will break and stay stuck in the green.
Oh, that's a good spot for it.
You look at it and say it's okay. Just like when you look at it, you can't tell if the powder's caked, but you don't know. And if your life's on the line, most of the time just isn't good enough. You want to be sure. I mean, nobody would go into a plane with only a 25% compliance to maintenance procedures.
Right.
You just wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So the product design, the pressure, the metal, the equipment you need to service it is a challenge. But then you get into the servicing of it. And so one of the problems, interesting, this is why it's complex, is that buyers buy extinguishers, they're red and they have tags. That's all I knew when I started with John. So you go into any facility and you'll find 8, 10, 12 different brands. Each brand has different parts and they each have different chemical agents, and UL tests them, and it's $150,000 per test. So it's really expensive that you go through. But when a fire service company's in to service them, if they're doing the annual inspection, they just sign the tag and they look at it to make sure it's in the right place. But when they do a 6-year teardown to check for moisture, to check for rust, to check for caking, to check for packing, they have to take it all apart. And when they do, they don't carry 12 different kinds of powders for 12 different types of fire extinguishers. They carry one. So they'll just fill it up and top it off, and then that violates the code. And that's where we finally got data that said, you know what? We did 100 different fire extinguishers from 82 different major companies with 50 different fire extinguisher service providers, and 100% of those fire extinguishers failed to have the original powder in it. So servicing them is a challenge because it's hard. There's a lot of different types of fire extinguishers. You need a lot of different parts. It's under pressure. And then when you mix the powder, that hurts performance because you have a nozzle size. And if you have different particle sizes, your stream changes and how fast you put the powder out changes. So people don't really understand this, and folks don't really want to address it. So we're trying to educate people. And, one thing with your listeners, if you're interested in this, Dying Fire Protection Labs is doing a podcast April 21st. We can give you the information, and they're going to go through the results of the study and what they found and stuff. So people can understand it, so that buyers can understand it. So they're not buying 12 different types of fire extinguishers or brands. These are all dry chemical ABC. And then the users will say, service companies, I don't want to buy different brands. Don't swap out different brands for me because I know you can't service it right. And that's putting an unfair burden on you. So they're aware of that.
I got you.
But that's what we've learned. And, we've got the anecdotal stories and photos, and then we've got the hard data. And, one of the challenges from a preventative maintenance standpoint is, unless you bang on it, there's no way you can know if the powder's in the state where you're going to discharge it all. And unless you perform the 6-year service, the 6-year teardown, where they take it apart, they discharge it, and have someone who knows not to mix powders, you're going to have a contaminated product. And when I've looked at some of the construction fire safety plans, there's really a lack of awareness there, particularly in hot welding, because you look at it and say, we got to have a fire extinguisher and make sure the tag is right. And it's 1-year inspection. Well, unless you do something to maintain it, if you've been driving it in your truck like you described, it's going to be packed, and hitting it with a hammer dents it and then ends up with rust. So you compound the problem. And you really don't know if it's going to work or not, or how well it will work. And that's the issue that we're trying to educate people on, and how to address.
Yeah, and because I do something like, when I got into welding, I thought it was very important to teach safety up front. I mean, that's the first thing we cover. And part of, within the initial 2 weeks of a new class coming in, we go down to the Central Florida Fire Consortium. We have a partnership with the school. I mean, the school runs a lot of the training for Orange County, Osceola, Seminole, like all these guys, they come down there and they practice fire safety techniques and rescue and all that. But they actually do a fire extinguisher class for all my welding students. So, we talk about the different types of fire extinguishers, A, B, and C, this, special chemicals for, working with flammable metals and all this other stuff. After they go through the class, fire science, all this stuff, it's like a 1-day event. We go outside and then, they actually get to use a fire extinguisher. Because, everybody on a job site, they've done fire watch at one time or another. But nobody's ever properly trained on how to put out a fire. You're just a warm body, close to a red can. And, we can put a check in the box now. We meet the requirements of a fire watch. I've watched people fumble around during an active fire that couldn't figure out how to operate the fire extinguisher. That's why I thought it was a good idea to teach my students how to use a fire extinguisher. There's very simple instructions on the side of the can, step 1, step 2, step 3. But nobody ever tells you have to bang it on the ground to make sure it's not caked. You don't have, they don't tell you to point at the base of the fire and sweep away, and walk towards the fire and going from a side to side motion. They don't tell you that. So you see a lot of people, they rip the tag or they rip the pin out and they hit the lever and they start from the top down, and the next thing they're out of gas and, the fire's still there. So I thought one of the cool things was, to take the students out there and actually teach them how to properly use a fire extinguisher. So we go out there and we use a dry chem, and they set up a big pan. It's full of water, but it has propane plumbed into it. So the fire technician, he can actually, adjust the gas, set the pan on fire, and then control it from his box. And the students have to walk up and extinguish the fire properly. And if they don't, they get to do it again until they get it right. But I mean, I think that's something that, the average welder has not been trained in how to properly use a fire extinguisher. And now, you're telling me we have to add to the equation and, hey, make sure you bang it around a couple times first on the ground. So, the powder's not caked up on the inside, which is something, I never even thought of that.
That doesn't work very well.
I would imagine not.
Another issue with fire extinguisher in the design of them, again, it's a 65, 70-year-old technology. They all have a left-handed bias. So where the pin is situated, and I'm right-handed, so my initial move is to grab the nozzle with my right hand, but I have to reach across the fire extinguisher to pull the pin. So I have to actually put it down, and it takes an extra 5, 10, 15 seconds, where a fire doubles in size every 10 seconds. So the company that actually developed this through the inventors is a company out of Wisconsin, National Presto. They've been in business for over around 110 years. So ergonomically, they took this into consideration. So this is basically an ambidextrous fire extinguisher. It's not made of metal. It's made of an engineered polymer, which is actually stronger than rolled steel. So, the years that took to make this, to get UL listing, to get NFPA approval, it was millions of dollars and many, many, many years to do this. So this isn't something that we just decided to put together ourselves. We are Fire Technology Innovations, which is us. We're a master distributor. And there's only a handful of us, Lowe's and Granger. These are also distributors too. So for those companies to carry this product, obviously it took them years to vet it, to make sure they're not offering a product that is a so-called not what it's meant to be. So, the design of this is incredible. The looks of it, it's actually a very cool looking product that when people see it, they know what it is. So you'll be seeing these all through Lowe's in their businesses. We just sold a bunch to a hotel out in Arizona, one of the Hilton brands, Boeing. I mean, there's some major corporations now. They're now picking these up because they understand, it's going to save them a lot of money, but it's more about safety. They need to make sure that this thing works every time because a fire extinguisher actually is designed to get you out of the building. So that's why they're by the entrances of all buildings. And, again, the bottom line is all about safety. But for you guys, hey, you're welding at a couple thousand degrees. And there's a lot of things that could go up really, really quick. And for you to be able to just reach over and know that, hey, this fire extinguisher is going to work and it's going to put out the flame, or it's going to get me out of a facility that's going up in flames. So, again, we're all about safety, but also it's all about security, as well as, bringing new technology to an industry that hasn't seen it in generations.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the ARC Junkies podcast is brought to you by AHP Welders. These are great machines for anyone looking to get into welding for under $1,000. Check them out today at ahpwelds.com. Get all the power and performance you need for small jobs and projects at a fraction of the price. And if you buy any TIG machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, be sure to use ARC Junkies in the comment section at checkout to get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch. This segment is also brought to you by my friends over at Strong Hand Tools. They make some great products to improve speed and accuracy for all your projects. Whether it's a Strong Hand Rhino cart with a 66-piece fixturing kit, or their clamps, third hands, or bottle carriers, they just make life as a welder and fabricator that much easier. Check them out today at stronghandtools.com/ARC Junkies. Let's go ahead and get back into the show. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty neat. And I just wanted to bring up the price point because I checked it out because you said they're available at Lowe's. They're running about $150 at Lowe's, $149.99. Now the fire extinguisher that I picked up for my business was $75. Now, if I'm running a legitimate business and I'm working on a job site and everything, I'm required to have a fire extinguisher on my vehicle or near me. And then I pulled up the cost for an annual inspection, and that's $40 to $100. So now, the first year in, I'm into this thing. Let's say $175, $150, $175. Your fire extinguisher's already paid for itself, and I don't have to get it inspected. Or if I do have to swap out the cartridge, I can do the online training course and I can do it myself and just, utilize one of the replacement cartridges.
So Jason, I want to just, because there's a lot of confusion on this point. So it has to be inspected. We have to follow the code. So if any fire marshal listens to the podcast and says, well, what are you talking about? No, you have to follow the code. But because the technology simplifies the tools that you need, particularly around the pressure, because you don't have to inspect for rust, taking the test, the certification test, is much simpler. And you have to be licensed by the state, follow the state rules in Florida or California or Texas or wherever. But it's possible that someone who doesn't have 30 years of experience is not commercially working on 20 different types of fire extinguishers. For them, for me, I got my license as a fire technician in California, but this makes it really easy to do it. So you got to do monthly inspections. You got to do annual maintenance. You have to follow the Russo instructions for servicing. But since it's not pressurized, you don't have to shoot it off. You can fluff the wheel and know that the powder's broken up. And so you really have to do all those inspections and stuff, but it's just easier to do.
Right. And would it still be cheaper than a traditional fire extinguisher? It's
easier to do, yeah.
No, would it be cheaper than a traditional fire extinguisher for the inspection? I mean, for a company, obviously, because you could have your safety guy take that annual safety training, and then he can test everything in that facility.
Right.
For your bigger companies, and even for the average, one-man band or, one-man welding guy, he can go out there and take the same test and provide, get that service and take care and maintain his own fire extinguishers. And then he's still code compliant.
Exactly.
Think, as you think about safety, if you're not doing it, if somebody else does it to you, it's a hobby that's someone else's responsibility. Because I did all the safety work in the plants, it was really, no, this is the technician's job. This is the plant manager's job. You've got to follow the guidelines and make sure that whatever it is, you're doing it.
Yep.
So the fact that you can take an action to make sure the fire extinguisher is going to work is a very powerful influencer to change behavior and help people get in touch with how to use this, be comfortable with it. And so, like you mentioned, a lot of people never fired them off. They go, oh my God, what is this? How do I pull the pin and all that? No, this is, you learn it, but it's part of your job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's preventative maintenance. And I think, yourself, when you do welding, you want to make sure all your equipment, when you start welding, is working properly and that you've done whatever the maintenance procedure is, because you don't want to have an emergency come up and then find yourself in a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about that. Like, as a welder, I'm going to go and inspect all my gear before you use it. If I have to put on a climbing harness because I'm going to get above 6 feet off the ground, I'm going to inspect my harness. I'm going to make sure there's no rips, tears, burns in there. There's no thread missing. The lanyard's still intact. Everything's functioning. Same thing with my welding machine. I'm going to make sure it has enough gas and oil and all that stuff. I'm going to do all my preventative maintenance checks and services on all my safety gear. But when it comes down to the fire extinguisher, the only thing I know of is green means go. So I'm good, right? It's within date and it's got a green, that little arrow that I guess when it defaults to broken, it stays in the green, which I think that's a piss poor design when you think about it. But that's really all people know about fire extinguishers. Make sure it's in the green, it's within date, and it should be good to go whenever you need it.
Right.
That's why we feel so strongly about this, because you can make it part of your regular maintenance. So if you're going on the site, checking all that stuff up, you don't have to rely on someone else to prepare the eliminator fire extinguisher to be ready to use. So that's what one of our customers does. He has a fire rig because fires, you need layer protection. There's different kinds of fires and different types of extinguishers. The dry chemical is one that puts out ABC fires, but there's foam systems. There's others that are very useful as well. And so having different ones for different situations makes sense. But you can set up for every job site. And this guy travels 1,000 miles to go to a site way out in the wilderness, welding on some high cell towers. So he sets up the eliminators. He takes them off his rig. He puts them in a spot where they're going to be handy in case there's an issue. He follows the construction safety site plans. He files all the stuff he needs to do with local fire departments and stuff, but he fluffs the eliminator so he knows they're ready. He puts up 3 or 4 reload kits. He fluffs them so they know they're ready. He has them handy so in case one goes off, he goes through a bunch. He can change it in a minute, he's told us. So because he does that and he takes the same kind of care for his other fire prevention, the same kind of care for his equipment, he's had 0 losses in terms of dollars on his work, 0 significant injuries. And this has enabled him to reduce his insurance costs by, he says, 40%. And it's a big part of his marketing program to say, hey, not only do I do great work on the welds in very difficult situations with all types of jobs, I do it really safe. But he's got that mindset. And when you build something in the person's work and it's part of their responsibility and they take ownership for it, you get that behavior change we talked about that's so important.
And I think that's a big thing is just as a contractor or subcontractor, being safe and stuff. So when you roll up onto a job site, we talked about your insurance rating. So if you have a piss poor insurance rating because, you have bad practices or, your equipment's not up to snuff, you're a liability to that contractor. And that's probably one of the things they're going to look at because whatever your insurance doesn't take care of, the contractor's insurance is going to have to take care of. So, being able to hire an individual that actually works safe and making safety part of your job. Like at the end of the day, we're welders or whatever trade we're involved in, safety is everybody's job. And I'm a huge proponent of safety. I've seen, dozens of accidents on job sites that could have been performed had a safety plan been put in place or had they followed the safety plan. So, a lot of people get so wrapped up in the work, they forget about the safety.
Yeah.
And I just think it's, a fire extinguisher, it's very simple. It's probably often overlooked, but when you actually set a fire, or you're next to a fire on the job site, I mean, that's the first thing you do. You need to get that fire out, because I didn't realize that it spread or doubled in size every 10 seconds. That's pretty significant. We actually did a job for a contractor one time, and there's many trades out, in the area working all together in unison. And I had one of my welders were up on top of this catwalk system, and he's doing his welding. And then the painting crew comes up, and they're not paying attention to, the hot sparks falling. And they set open buckets of acetone right inside the hot work.
Wow.
And nobody's, they're not paying attention. The welder has no idea, because he can't really see through. Sparks are falling through the catwalk system. One of the buckets ignites, and that's the story I was telling you about. One of the apprentices, who's supposed to be on fire watch, that's his only job, picks up the fire extinguisher, couldn't figure out how to use it, because he's freaking out. And you 3 simple steps, point, pull, squeeze, pull, point, squeeze, 3 simple steps. He lost his marbles and couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something that's often overlooked, but I mean, had we not put the fire out in time, the other paint and other products and stuff that they had laying in the area could have been a much worse situation. So
for your team, your people, so when you're going on a new job site, so the contractor then actually he checks your background as far as, all your certifications and, your insurance, if there was anything filed against you. How does that work? I
mean, that's what I would do if I was a general contractor. If I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to pull up their safety rating, or, their insurance, if they have any negligent claims against them. I mean, I never personally dealt with it, but I know the company that I was working with, if we had an accident or anything like that, they had to file, it had to be made public. And, they, especially if they got like an OSHA fine or anything like that, all that information is made public. So as a general contractor, I would imagine that they're going to do their due diligence and make sure that whoever they're bringing onto their job site isn't going to be a liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that we're interested in help educate people on, because as you look at the NFPA instructions on recommended safety plans, they really don't deal much with fire extinguishers other than to do what you said. Do you have one there? Do you have a couple there? Are they tagged, and have they been inspected? And is it in the green? Mm-hmm. Because there's just not a knowledge of this. And that one of the things that we're looking to drive is get data on fire extinguishers, because NFPA puts out a lot of studies. And so, quote, they have a lot of data. So John and I looked at a study that's on structural fires. So homes and apartment buildings and stuff like that. So we looked at the 2020 study that was released in November. And I think the number was 335,000 fires over the course of the year. And so they have the data on where the fire happened, where in the building did it happen. Was it in a living room? Was it in a kitchen? Was it in a garage? Wherever that was. What were the demographics of the people? Were they high school students? Were they older people? Did they have smoke detectors in place? Did they function? Did they have a sprinkler system if it was a bigger building? Did that go off as exposed? And that's it. Nothing on fire extinguishers. So if you look at the progress on smoke detectors, that codes have evolved, but they've gone from 1-year batteries to 10-year batteries to hard wiring on new construction. And sprinkler systems have done too, but they have collected a lot of data to understand the issues. So we think it's really important to educate people on fire extinguishers and gather the data so that we can find out. And, now when we've talked to different fire chiefs and firefighters collecting data on arson or other fires, they have something that says, well, there a fire extinguisher there. And what they put down is if it didn't work, it was user error. They, like your example, didn't know how to pull the pin. But they don't take it any farther. So there's a real dearth of data. So we're looking to bring people together to say, let's get the data, let's do education. Let's change NFPA's instructions for construction safety plans to include actually maintaining the fire extinguisher by a means other than just looking at the tag and seeing if it's been inspected. Because 1 year inspection doesn't really get inside to see if there's a problem. And a 6-year inspection, unfortunately, when you take it apart, the way it gets serviced causes you to violate the code. So it creates another problem. So we're big proponents of that because people's lives are at risk.
Right. Now, how simple?
Mike,
go ahead, John.
And Mike was talking about, gathering data. So we actually had a Zoom call with one of the fire marshals of the entire state, 2-term fire marshal. And that was one question I asked him. I said, okay, you go in and do a survey of a fire. Maybe somebody got hurt, maybe somebody died, and 5 fire extinguishers failed. I go, how do you guys report that? And he, without hesitation, says, we call that user error. So how many people have been hurt, injured, property damaged because fire extinguishers failed? Nobody really knows. They thought it was all anecdotal. But to really understand the breadth of this issue, that's what we're doing. We're bringing this to light. So we're opening up a lot of people's eyes because something has to change. The whole ecosystem is flawed. And so we're, again, bringing this to light. So that's why a lot of these companies who have these professional EHS people on staff are really taking a look at this because they don't understand that there has been no data gathered, and now we're gathering data. So a lot of people are being enlightened to that. So our mission obviously is for safety, but it's also enlightenment. So
let me get this straight. When the fire extinguisher fails, they call that user error.
Correct.
Wow. That's very similar to like dog bites per breed. I know, a weird analogy, but they say, the German Shepherd, there's most dog bites or whatever. Well, they incorporate the police dog into that data.
Right.
So like if a police dog, it's his job to bite somebody when they turn them loose. That data is collected. So now, a German Shepherd or a Belgian Malinois look like the most ferocious, animal out there.
Exactly.
Where, there's something wrong in the evaluation there, that some of that stuff should be excluded, or, a fire extinguisher malfunction maybe should be in there versus user error, because the user may have done everything correct, but there was a malfunction with the equipment.
Right. And that's not notated.
Yeah. Wow. And so then, it's a little more complicated too, because, if you've got a caked fire extinguisher because it's been serviced and it's got moisture limits up, nobody picks it up to run a test on it. They just say, well, didn't work. So we don't really know why. If you're on a construction site and one of them, you have an explosion of a fire extinguisher, I'm not sure they even report it. It's just, fortunately, people don't get hurt, but it just makes a huge mess. Mm-hmm. And someone could get hurt if the top blows off, but these things just aren't captured in a database that I've seen, and I've looked at a number of them. So it's hard to drive improvement. It's hard to build awareness unless you have the facts.
Right. Now, how easy, because like everybody, like you said, this design that we're currently using has been around for 60, 70 years. You guys have been on the market, a couple years now?
Correct.
How the average guy, average guy, average gal, they see this fire extinguisher hanging on the wall, yours, the Eliminator, a fire breaks out. How easy is it to walk over there and pick it up, knowing what we know about fire extinguishers, to use yours?
So it's very easy. First, the instructions are on the case, but it's intuitive. So you twist the tamper-resistant seal. It pops out. You pull down a lever and you arm it. Mm-hmm. And then whether you're left-handed or right-handed, it's ambidextrous. You've got the handle on it. It doesn't cut my hand like I do on some of the metal ones. And the nozzle is at the end of the hose. And it's designed for good grip. And then when you sweep, you get spray as opposed to, many of them just have a stream.
Like a stream.
Right. So you get a good balance between reach and spread. Because if you have a stream, it's very hard to put the fire out because you're putting a lot of chemical in one spot. Mm-hmm. When you have a spread, you're spreading it out, and that's what puts out the fire.
Okay.
It's a very simple twist, pull, grab, sweep, and follow the procedure that you described.
Okay.
And the nozzle itself, it can be regulated, so it isn't coming out at one, because a lot of times what happens
one pressure.
When that pressure, it may part the fire. Where here you actually have a nozzle that actually has a lever. where you can go more, less, or whatever. So you can actually regulate it yourself before you didn't. Again, one stream versus being able to understand that, hey, I can, do it full force or take it down a notch too to put the fire out. So
kind of like a garden hose attachment.
And something else with ours, it's the 5-pounder, which is a commercial brand. Our fire extinguisher actually has 6 pounds of powder. So our 5-pounder sometimes has the knockdown capability of the competitor's 10-pound fire extinguisher. So you're getting somewhat more bang for your buck.
Because it's not in a steel case.
Yes, in the design, and it's tapered. And when the UL Labs was doing the test, if you have a fire extinguisher, regular pressurized fire extinguisher, they consider it a success when you're getting 70% of the powder coming out. When they did their tests with the eliminator, again, having 6 pounds of powder, the technicians there that were doing the tests were getting basically 96, 97, 98% of the powder. They were just left with residue. And that's what was another big thing for them. They were very impressed with, the design, because you have this CO2 cartridge. Once it's released, it has this just incredible power that really, really gets the powder out and on the fire. Whereas before, again, having the one stream and getting not as much out. And again, that's more data that hasn't been ever gathered when a fire extinguisher is used, how much of that powder is actually expelled.
Mm-hmm. And are these fire extinguishers, are they class A, B, and C, or do you do like a class D for flammable metals or anything like that? Or is it just one type of powder for right now?
So we have ABC and we have Purple K. So Purple K is a BC fire extinguisher, and then the monoammonium phosphate is the ABC.
Okay.
And we have a 2.5 pounder, which we actually have 3 pounds of powder in it, but the industry is 2.5 pounds. That'll be out in June. And our 5-pounder for both ABC and Purple K will be out, is currently available. And then our 10-pounder is going through the final testing in UL, which is an aging test. And so that'll be out later this year.
Okay. I think it's a pretty cool system. I'm actually considering highly ditching my metal can. I still want to take it and test it before I do anything with it, but it is time for me to invest in a new fire extinguisher, especially since I'm doing a lot of at-home work, because my shop is attached to my home. So if I lose one, I lose them both. So it'd probably be a good idea to have that, I got sparks flying around in my garage working on projects and stuff. It'd probably be a good idea to have some sort of fire suppression readily available.
That is going to work, and you have the confidence. So think about it. If you're out taking your truck to a site that's very far away, where you're not going to get your fire extinguisher serviced, so you can carry a spare part that you can reload in, and you have the confidence. If you're out in a boat where the pounding, the vibration is high, and if it doesn't work, you're in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. If you're in a school bus, getting the driver to make part of their daily routine, fluffing the wheel so that you'll know that it's ready in case you need it. All those situations are, you want to have it.
Yeah.
You want to have that.
I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah, Jason, we look forward to when you get one and you try it and you think about what we're discussing and you pick it up and feel it, and then you switch hands and then do that with a regular fire extinguisher. You get a feel, and come back to us and tell us what you think, because we've done that. And, I always knew that fire extinguishers are red and had a tag, but that was it till we got into this.
Yeah. That's pretty much everybody's kind of notion of fire extinguishers. It's red, it's got a tag on it, and it's got a hose.
And we like to use the analogy too, like a spare tire. You very rarely have to use it, but when you do, damn it, that thing, you better hope that sucker's, works and is pressurized.
Yeah.
Whereas here, this fire extinguisher, if you do have to use it, you want to make sure, that thing, it's ready and it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. Where can people get more information on your products?
So you go to our website, and so it's www.teamfti.com, and they can order them online there. We have a good, easy way to do that. And we've got a lot of description of the technical details, and we've got some videos of how it's put out fires. We've got videos of how it works, of how to reload it, all that is there. And then that will then take you to a test you can do to learn about it. And I think testing is good for everybody. Like, I really applaud you for, as part of your training for welders, you recognize that they didn't have experience with fire extinguishers. You built that into the training. You know, we like to say the more you know, the better you are. So taking this test will really help prepare you for that.
Okay. And then you guys are all also on Instagram at Fire Technology Innovations, right?
Yep.
Correct. Yeah, all the social medias, we're blanketing them. You know, us old guys, you know, had to learn how to do that type of stuff. But hey, we're champs now.
No, it's working. I learned a lot about the product just by checking out, you know, the Instagram page, seeing some of the videos on there. You know, some of them it's comical, but then when you think about it, it's not. It's like, holy shit, you know, this stuff's actually out there.
Yeah.
And you never think about it.
What's really very cool right now, within the next couple months, we have a lot of fire authorities, fire marshals. They're actually doing evaluations, and they're going to be, you'll see those online too, because they're the ones that are the most excited. As I mentioned before, you know, for them, it's not just, you know, something they need, it's something that they have to have, and it has to work every time. So for them, they understand the shortcomings of traditional pressurized metal canister fire extinguishers. So having something new in their arsenal, you know, like Mike was talking about, you know, the fire alarms, how the technology in that has basically gone crazy over the past couple, you know, past decade, whereas fire extinguishers, you know, again, 70 years of nothing. So, but we're pretty excited. And, you know, if there's any question or anything like that, you know, you give us a call or, you know, look us up online, any type of messaging, email. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, Mike, John, I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to inform the listeners of the show all about your new product. And hopefully we can start, you know, getting some information out there and get people excited about it.
Appreciate your time there, Jason, man.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you this week. Thanks again for stopping by. And once again, happy National Welding Month. Be sure to swing by ArcJunkies.com and check out all the Arc Junkies hats, shirts, and hoodies by clicking on the merch tab. And don't forget to tune in Wednesday on Instagram for Weld Wednesday with AWS, where I'll be talking with Nick Bazatis, Chloe Hudson, and Chandler Vincent on a live show at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on the AWS Instagram page. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.